It's time for a Big Blue Kickoff Live.
Nobody can ever tell you that you couldn't do it, because you did.
On Giants.com.
You know what I saw? New York Giant pride.
And the Giants mobile app.
17-14 is the final. One touchdown, we are world champions. Believe it, and it will happen.
Part of the Giants Podcast Network.
Let's go out there like a bunch of crazy dogs. Have some fun.
Welcome to Tuesday's edition of Big Blue Kickoff Live here on Giants.com, as well as the mobile app. You can watch us on YouTube, too. It is presented by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the New York Giants. He's Paul Dottino. I'm Lance Medow with you for the next 60 minutes. Multiple ways. If you interact with us here on the program, you give us a ring, 201-939-4513. You could use hashtag GiantsChat on Twitter. He's at GiantsWFAN. I'm at Lance Medow, one word, last name, Medow. And we are broadcasting from the Giants Podcast Studio. It is presented by Hackensack Meridian Health. Keep getting better. So a lot to tackle over the course of the program. Some takeaways from the heartbreaking loss to the Saints on Sunday, and then looking ahead with the quick turnaround to the Eagles game coming up on Thursday here at MetLife Stadium. Brian Daboll actually is speaking to the media as we are on the airwaves here, so if anything comes to light from that, we will relay it. There was an injury report yesterday, not that it was full-blown practice, given the fact that most of the stuff yesterday is walkthrough, but in terms of who did not take part in practice on Monday, you had Swayze Bozeman, their linebacker, Jermaine Illuminor, their starting tackle, then Demetrius Flanagan-Fowles, linebacker, and Darius Slayton. Both of the last two guys dealing with a hamstring injury, Illuminor back and Bozeman an ankle. Then there were a handful of players that were limited, including Jackson Dart. So we're expected to get an update on some of those players. I would say probably the one player that jumps off the page of that group is Darius Slayton, given the current state of the wide receiver core and Malik Neighbors being out for the season, Paul.
And hamstrings are always so tricky, Lance. We know that. You can feel good one day, then you go push it, and now it's aggravated, and you take a couple of steps back. It is a short week, as you mentioned. They've got the Thursday night game at home against Philadelphia. Now, to be honest, I'm real sketchy on Slayton's availability because I know how nasty those hamstrings can be. I mean, there's just no telling. And it doesn't even have to be like the next day. He could go out there, run a couple of routes in practice, and by the fourth snap, I feel a tweak. I mean, that's how those things go. So I'm not real optimistic as we sit here today about Slayton. I feel a little bit better about Illuminor.
And you just don't have enough treatment time during the course of the week, too, right?
No.
You know, if you have a few extra days, if we're talking about a Sunday game, that could go a long way in at least maybe helping you get out onto the field. And Illuminor with the back, I mean, that's another thing that could flare up at any time. You could feel great one day, you sleep awkwardly, and then all of a sudden, the next morning, it's a different story.
I didn't get the impression, though, from even after the game was over, that he was in too much discomfort. Now, again, things can change overnight. You never know how a guy sleeps on it, and then the next morning he's feeling bad. But I don't think Illuminor is going to be as much of an issue.
On the flip side for the Eagles, Saquon Barkley did not practice with a knee issue, though he did get through the game against the Broncos on Sunday. I think their most noticeable injury is Landon Dickerson, one of their starting guards, the ankle injury, because obviously he's been a staple of their play in the trenches, so that could be iffy given the quick turnaround there. He's dealing with an ankle injury, and then one of their tight ends, Grant Calcaterra, is dealing with an oblique injury, so he was the third and final player that did not participate. So not as big as the Giants' laundry list, but remember, statuses change quickly because today is going to be the first formal practice for both of these teams. Actually, it's going to be the only practice this week.
Yeah, I mean, hey, look, I get it. The league does the Thursday games because it's financially very lucrative for them. We totally understand that. And the Players Union, getting a percentage of the overall league revenues, they okayed it and said, yeah, when they made Thursday Night Football a staple, the Players Union knew that it was going to mean more money in the pot for them, and so they went for it. Now, there are a lot of players, and you know this, certainly coaches, but a lot of players who will tell you, I wasn't really on board with this. I didn't like it so much. But at the same time, when they go and they cash their paychecks and they realize that the additional revenue by having Thursday Night Football from the networks, it really does pay off to everybody in terms of their pocketbooks. no matter how much they may grumble about the fact that they don't like to play on a Thursday.
Well, because you get another network like Amazon Prime in the mix within the bidding war. So from a financial perspective, obviously that's all you need to know. I think we've had enough seasons where we get that there's a lot of cons, especially the road team is usually at an extreme disadvantage because
No doubt.
they've got to travel, whereas the home team doesn't. So you're not practicing as it is, and then all of a sudden one of the days you've got to head to an opposing city. Eagles, Giants, maybe it's not as bad because they're relatively close. And I think that's one of the reasons. I would say, if you were to ask me, I don't like divisional games being on Thursday because they're too important, but I get why they'd want this game because from a geographical standpoint, it's not that stressful for the Eagles on a quick turnaround to go down the turnpike and come to MetLife Stadium.
Well, I haven't talked to Mike North, who was involved in the scheduling process for the NFL, but they have a whole list of things as they're putting that schedule together that they will like or that they won't like. I would suspect one of the reasons that they wanted this game is because Amazon, being one of the partners who pays big money, over the course of the years since they've been involved in the package, they've tried to exert more and more influence as to some games that they thought would draw. Well, you know a New York-Philadelphia game is going to draw, if not just because of Saquon Barkley, but because of the two largest markets that you have. And in addition to that, there was also a thought that, well, if Russell Wilson's not playing, Jackson Dart probably will. So I understand. I'm sure Amazon put their 2 cents into like, hey, could we be considered for that game?
Oh, without a doubt. And the heated rivalry going back decades, not just necessarily in recent history, which may have not been as competitive as the Giants had hoped. But I also think the strong selling point, whether the networks want it or not, is, for example, you had Niners-Rams last Thursday. If you have divisional games on Thursday, you figure the travel is less because normally the teams within the division
that's part of it.
are within close proximity. So
there are so many factors,
correct.
but I'm sure that's one of the nuggets on the table.
Well, I will say this, from a coaching player perspective, it's at least a strong selling point to make the pill a little bit more digestible that, hey, if we're going to have to flip the script quickly, at least we don't have to get on a long flight, or maybe we could pull off a train ride or a bus ride. So that, I think, definitely comes into play. You could walk it. Absolutely. Yeah, they could corner off a section of the turnpike, and Paul Dottino will get his miles in, and everybody will be
That's
happy.
all. That's all. Just like when George Martin walked across the entire country.
There you go.
Right? Why not?
100%. See, it's killing two birds with one stone.
The only problem is I would mandate good weather. And I
don't know if Mother Nature is going to
Mother Nature will cooperate with
that.
that. But I would mandate good weather. I would consider walking to Philadelphia, but I would have to have good weather.
Well, if you do that, then I will have the documentary crew, and I will be providing play-by-play commentary as you do that. So I'm signed up. I'll walk alongside with you, but I'll just be the narrator.
Okay, well, so the other stipulation, I got to get Nike to sponsor it because I would have to. I would probably go through a couple of pairs.
That's fine.
Of my Nikes.
Well, that's why if you have a production team, they will have extra pairs.
Fine.
And then you could just pull over to the side. You could change. Lack of interruption, and it's business as usual.
There you go.
We would accommodate you within every respect of that. All right, we're going to try to accommodate some of the topics that we teased off the top. I know, obviously, on yesterday's program, a lot was made of the Saints-Giants game. I just wanted to provide a takeaway or two, and then we can obviously move on to more of a preview, Paul, with respect to the Giants-Eagles matchup. But it goes without saying, when you turn the ball over 5 times, okay, you're not going to put yourself in a position to win, let alone remain competitive. But what I think needs to be brought up, the killer for the turnovers, it's not just that you lost possessions. That goes without saying. It's the fact that 4 of the 5 turnovers took place when they were in Saints territory.
Correct.
That's what made it worse than any other element that you want to put under the umbrella, because you at least were in a position, at worst, maybe you could have gotten a field goal opportunity, and you do the math, 4 times 3, 12 points. I'm not saying that they're going to walk away with a win, but it does change the dynamics and now how the Saints have to attack things very differently.
The worst one of all was Scadaboo's fumble inside the 15 because that turns into 7 on the fumble return.
That was the lone right zone one. Yep.
That's the one, to me, more than any other of those turnovers. That was the one that really stuck that fork in my eye.
And when you do that, and, oh, by the way, the opposition scores a touchdown, then you're really asking for
Yeah, because there's nothing you can do about it. They returned the fumble. They're gone. There is no defense for that.
Plus, it was a Saints offense that was not necessarily lighting up the scoreboard, was also still working on getting explosive plays, which they wound up.
Why are we
getting.
doing this?
Well,
I don't want to relive this.
No, I get it. Well, I'm just providing
It's a house of
my
voodoo.
perspective.
The Giants are 4-10 all time in that Superdome. It is a terrible, 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 nightmarish, horrible place for the Giants to play. It's a very nice stadium, by the way. And the people are incredibly kind.
I love it how you're sugarcoating it on the back end, but go ahead.
Well, they are.
Yeah.
They're very kind people. They're lovely people. They're nice
I'm sure
people.
they appreciate that commentary.
And the stadium, incredible. The way they've redone the Superdome over the years since Katrina and so forth, it's spotless. It has survived the test of time. It was built in 1975. Think about this. 75. Ali beat Spinks in the rematch to win the heavyweight championship for an unprecedented third time in 1978 in that building. And yet it looks like it was just opened 5 months ago. They have done a great job with the building. Folks, New Orleans, I love your building. I just hate what happens there. 4-10. And the voodoo is so strong. I do think there's somebody in a closet somewhere in that building who has a Giants doll, and bang, they're just sticking pins in it left and right. I believe that.
Now, is it one Giants doll, or do they rotate personnel? Do they have an entire team of dolls? Like, do they have 11 personnel on offense?
I think they
and 11 on
probably
defense?
have a white jersey and a blue jersey.
A blue jersey.
Giants
Oh,
doll.
that's convenient.
And they figure out, okay, what jersey are the Giants going to wear in
And
this?
they match it up.
And we're just going to
And
get
they
that
hammer
whole
away.
bucket full of pins and
There you
just
go.
start sticking them.
Sure, yeah. Well, the voodoo, in fairness, didn't work too well when Eli threw for 6 touchdowns, okay?
No, it did, because Breeze threw for 7.
And
then
they
Brad
lost
Wing
on a
got
field goal.
called for a face
Sure.
mask on the
Well,
last play from scrimmage, and the Saints kicked a 50-yard field goal to beat the Giants.
So the operator of the voodoo doll then only showed up in the fourth quarter, is what you're saying?
he waited to the very last
Correct.
play.
Okay, so he took off the first 3. He let the Giants have some fun, and then he came out of the closet in the fourth, and all of a sudden
These voodoo
started.
people know exactly what they're doing. They know exactly where to stick the pins, too.
Yeah, I hear, witches are very popular in the Big Easy. You may want to do
I'm
some
having
research
fun,
and look
folks,
into
but
that.
it's the only
Yeah.
way I can prevent myself from crying or doubling over in pain.
And that's why we have boxes of tissues on the left to the right of the studio. And
Johnny
John
Mac, help me
also
out here. Will you
has
please get this man off the
overwhelming
subject?
amount.
I don't want to talk about that game anymore.
I know. The nerve of me to weigh in on a game that happened 2 days ago. I'm sorry. What was I thinking in terms of weighing in on that subject matter? As we move forward in all seriousness, as far as this Philadelphia matchup, which I think Paul can at least maybe squeeze in a little analysis, we hope. The Eagles, a lot has been made, Paul. And this drives me nuts, really, with every opponent, but specifically the Eagles. Well, Philly's not who they were previously. They haven't been getting the ball to Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown. The passing attack is not necessarily electric, and they blew a 17-0 lead to the Broncos as Denver scored 18 unanswered and this and that. First of all, based on what the Giants are going through right now, they are in no position to take any team for granted or say that they are in the driver's seat against a team that may not be playing its best football. Plus, if you really want to go deep into the mental exercises and gymnastics, how about the Eagles so irritated based on how Sunday's game played out, and now you're getting that team after suffering their first loss of the season on a quick turnaround? I mean, if you really believe in powers that go above and beyond X's and O's, then you could throw that on the fire as well. Philly is still an extremely dangerous team. I think, though, the biggest priority of all, even if you don't think they're explosive in the passing attack, Saquon also plays a role within that passing attack. Remember, he caught a touchdown against Denver.
47 yards.
So I don't want to hear anything about maybe the receivers having doing the heavy lifting or Dallas Goedert, when Barkley, they can run on routes and all of a sudden they can hit him for the home run. So you have to account for him in terms of the ground attack as well as what he could do easily as a receiver out of the backfield.
Look, Lance, let's not kid ourselves. No matter how much Philly's is scuffling recently, and we've heard the complaints about the passing game not being on track and how A.J. Brown is a bit disappointed. He's not getting his targets. Barkley in the last couple of games has had trouble even cracking the 50-yard mark in any of those games rushing-wise. So I understand all of that stuff. But it's still the dreaded Philadelphia Eagles, a team that's owned the Giants for the better part of the last 15 years. Okay? And it all comes down to this. if you're going to have a chance to win this game as the Giants, you better play clean football first, and second of all, you better make some plays above the X's and the O's. I mean, to revisit the game the other day, Slayton drops the bomb. Then the flea flicker, which was a tougher play to make.
It was a little bit underthrown.
A little bit underthrown, and the DB actually got his forearm on the ball when it came down. But if you're going to make plays above the X's and O's, you got to make that play. Now, I didn't grade him for a drop on that one. But if you want to be a winning football team, you've got to reach above the stars and occasionally make a play that you're not supposed to make. And that was against the New Orleans team that was winless. You're talking about an Eagles team that, while they are scuffling some, they're 4-1.
Yeah.
So
they find ways to win games, despite.
And by the way, the reason that the Eagles are 4-1, there are two reasons more than anything else. First of all, they're playing sound defense. Second of all, they have been unstoppable in the red zone. I believe their red zone percentage is 92%, by far leading the NFL. Can you check on that for me?
I will. I'm going to look that up right now.
They don't get stopped inside the 20. And obviously, when you have a terrific offensive line and you have an outstanding running back and you have a quarterback who is very strong with his legs, and I'm not just talking about running around, I'm talking about power running too, that spells doom for the other team in the red zone. The only way that their red zone number is going to come down is if you force them into making mistakes. And you know what? They don't make them.
92% red zone conversion rate.
The number that I thought it was.
Well, and by the way, and I know
crazy.
It is crazy, and it's a small sample size because we've only been through 5 games, but just to give perspective, the next closest team, Paul, number 2 in the NFL, is at 77%. Yeah. So think about the distance between, it's the Dolphins, by the way, and the Lions are right on the back of Miami. They're just below at 76%. So that's a noticeable differential between the Eagles and then the next 2 closest teams.
I want to give you a couple of numbers here, Lance. And folks, I want you to understand this within context. Offensively, the Giants have had a better year than Philadelphia has, except in the red zone. 92% compared to 32% last in the league for the Giants. Think about that. 92% to 32%. First team, 32nd team. But in terms of first downs per game, yards rushing per game, yards passing per game, the Giants are ahead of Philadelphia in every offensive category. If I asked 100 people on the street this morning, do you think true or false? 99 of them would have said false. I guarantee you they would have said false.
The only thing I would say, as we're talking about context, in fairness, Paul, is I do think the Cowboys game skews the numbers a bit.
It does.
Okay?
It does.
Because let's look at it. Outside of that Dallas game where they put up 37, they have not scratched the surface of that scoring output or that first down output in any of the other games.
And the
that
Eagles had 2 30-point games.
Correct. So I think you got to look at it at least through that lens. But there's no doubt about it. I think your point is well taken in terms of Philly has taken a step back from a statistical standpoint.
Yes, but
nobody's
not in the red
disputing
zone,
that.
which is where points matter, right?
Yeah.
Because
got to finish drives.
Because it's not enough to just get into the red zone and settle for threes. They get 7s, okay? The Giants not only settle for threes, oftentimes they get none. They come out with 0. Do you know the Giants have only scored points on 2/3 of their trips inside the opponent's 30-yard line this year? I'm not even talking red zone. I keep a chart. I call it the scoring zone because we know how kickers hit 50-yarders like practically at will these days.
Yep.
So I keep a chart. When you get inside the opponent's 30, that's the scoring zone for me. How many times do you do something in the scoring zone? All right? Let me just give you numbers here because I have this right here. This tells you partly why the Giants are in such a mess right now. Because inside the scoring zone, they have only put up points on 2/3 of those opportunities. And I have the breakdown. It is 14 of 22. 14 of 22, 64%. Have the Giants put points on the board when getting to the other team's 30-yard
So
line.
you're taking into consideration field goals and or touchdowns.
7 for 7 on field goals.
Okay.
And 7 touchdowns. They've also fumbled the ball away once. They've thrown an interception once. They've lost the ball on downs 6 times. That's what you get.
Yeah, and then once again, when you move closer, which is to the red zone, you're talking about a conversion rate, and this is just touchdowns of 32%. Think about it. The Eagles are 92%. The Giants are 32%. I mean, those cannot be more extreme.
No.
So that is what is separating both of those squads
and
easily.
Quite honestly, I know everybody, rightfully so, was as disgusted as could be, as was I, with the New Orleans Saints game the other day. But Brian Daboll was right about one thing. They actually moved the ball pretty effectively. They really did.
Yeah. Well, that's why we talked about the turnovers being in New Orleans territory, 4 of the 5.
Dart did a pretty good job, certainly in the first quarter and a half. I mean, he was as perfect as he could be. He looked at sensational. They ran the ball somewhat effectively. Remember now, and this doesn't necessarily go with my blood, but it's part of what the Giants are right now. The quarterback is part of the rushing attack.
Yep. And we've seen him take advantage of that.
And the Giants are running for 110 yards a game as a team, in part because the quarterback has been running for 40 and 50 yards a game these last couple of games, with Dart taking off with his legs. Well, that is part of their attack now. Whether or not I prefer the quarterback to run, it's a matter of fact. Dart's legs are a part of what they do. And the Giants are middle of the pack in rushing this year. Middle of the pack. And that's an improvement. The offensive line, folks, it hasn't been as bad as it was in years past. They've actually gotten better some.
I just wonder, you hit on an interesting point, as Dart plays more and more games, and with Darius Slayton now banged up, all of a sudden, opponents can now start moving those safeties up a little bit more because they don't fear the passing attack, especially if they're saying, hey, our corners can handle the guys one-on-one on the boundary, which means, do you now start bottling up Dart a little bit better with him not having the ability to extend plays with his legs, and now you put the Giants in tougher third down situations or even second down situations? How much does that change the dynamics of the offense? That's something to monitor. Remember, now he's going up against, not that Brandon Staley wasn't a good defensive coordinator. I think Staley has proven that. Didn't work out necessarily as the Chargers head coach, but a really polished DC. Now he's going up against Vic Fangio. And of the 3 opponents thus far, I mean, this is by far his most challenging defensive coordinator that he will have seen, right? I mean, it's not even close.
Yep.
Jesse Minter, solid DC, but spent a lot of time in the college level. I just mentioned Brandon Staley. Fangio is as good as it gets in terms of NFL history as scheming up defenses. So that's going to be something to monitor. How do teams, now they realize, okay, Dart is, to your point, a prominent part of the run game. We're not going to let him all of a sudden spark things. We want to make him more of a conventional passer. Do you bring more personnel up, and does that now limit his pathway?
And at some point, you'll start seeing a spy.
Yeah.
A little bit, too.
Absolutely.
We got some updated information from Dan Salamone, the senior writer at Giants.com, who was out at Brian Daboll's presser just a short time ago. The Giants are going through a jog-through practice today. Darius Slayton not working, nor is Illuminor, nor is Flanagan Fowles, nor is Bozeman.
So those are all the guys, by the way, that did not practice on Monday.
And
that we
it's
said earlier.
status quo.
Yeah.
Brian Daboll says, quote, according to Dan, hopeful, unquote, for Tyrone Tracy, who has that shoulder injury, who would do more if they were practicing normally. So says Dan in his report. Jackson Dart, with that sore hammy, is going to be okay. Remember, he played the full game the other day without any incidents.
Yep.
So nothing to report on the QB, but hopeful for Tyrone Tracy. That's certainly interesting.
Well, if they can get an additional running back, him is just more of a spread the wealth type of mentality. Scadaboo's done a really nice job, but Tracy and Scadaboo, I think, offer the Giants perhaps a different look. And as I mentioned, if teams start honing in on Jackson Dart, at least you could turn back to your more conventional running backs. And we know Tracy can handle the load. He could also help out, by the way, in special teams. And that's the one other thing I want to touch on before we open up the phone lines here. And you can also tweet at us at Lance Medow, one word, last name, Medow. He is at Giants WFAN. The Eagles are outstanding in special teams, Paul, and we've seen the damage that they've done in terms of a blocked field goal. So that's the other area that the Giants have to be very careful. The Philadelphia special teams has manufactured and put points on the board. They haven't just changed field position, they've scored. And they're coming off the Giants a game in which they turned the ball over 5 times. It all came from the offense. The last thing you want to do is shorten the field for the Eagles' offense or give them an explosive play in that area. That is a major problem for a lot of opponents because Philadelphia gets great penetration. Schematically, they're very creative, and they also have good specialists. So while we're focusing a lot on the offensive firepower and the defense with Fangio, the third facet may be more prominent for Philadelphia than any other team currently in the National Football League.
I don't know if I totally agree with that. That's more reputation than numbers.
Well, I'm seeing it this season.
Well, this season, they are 16th in punt returns and 31st in kickoff returns. Those are not good numbers.
Well, 16th's not bad. I would say middle of the pack.
Fine.
But also,
that's fine.
But that doesn't take into consideration the blocking and the coverage. I'm talking
about the return.
You're talking about the return. I was talking about the coverage as well.
Giants are number 1. And by the way, how many times did you hear me during the offseason talk about the Giants' emphasis on special teams? Right now, the Giants are one of the best special teams unit in the entire league. Do you know they are number 1 in punt coverage? They're allowing less than 4 yards per punt return.
And Gillen's done a nice job,
Number
too. 1
in the league, and Gillen is a part of that. He's been terrific. Kickoff returns. Giants are giving up less than 23 yards per kickoff return. That is 4th in the league. Their coverage units are 1st and 4th in the NFL. So, to be honest with you, yes, you do have to worry about Philadelphia's ability to block kicks. That I agree with. But their return game right now is not very explosive, and the Giants have the best coverage units in the NFL at 1st and 4th in the league. So if you really want to talk about a way that the Giants could help themselves, tilt the field, okay? Tilt the field with that outstanding coverage units that you've been putting on game day. Use those guys to help stick Philadelphia deep and make them earn every drive. How about that?
Well, you'd rather them go 80 to 90 yards as opposed to half the field. And the reason also I'm bringing up, even if you want to say it's track record more, remember, the Giants only turned the ball over 3 times in the first 4 games. I'm talking about on offense or as a team, and then wound up coughing it up 5 times against the Saints. So you can tell me all you want about how good it's looked in one area. Philadelphia makes you uncomfortable, I would say, in areas that even you may have succeeded. And they do have a few return guys that they've utilized. They've had some injuries, but you look at Jahan Dotson, who's a veteran, John Mechie, who they're working in, Will Shipley, and Tank Bigsby, who they acquired from the Jaguars. All of those guys I mentioned have handled kickoffs, and the only one that's handled punts is Jahan Dotson. And Jake Elliott back to maybe his old self. He's 5 for 5 in field goals. He had an off year last year, but I think he's regrouped a little bit in that department. So that's a facet that could very well dictate the tone of this game, because it's not just about whether or not they can put points on the board, it's also starting field positioning, which is what you were hinting at.
The other huge number that sticks out like a sore thumb when you look at this Eagles team, and again, it's one of the other reasons beside the red zone number that they are 4-1, and they've escaped despite the fact that they've scuffled some. They're the only team in the NFL that has not thrown an interception. That's it. 0. In 5 weeks,
yeah,
they
7
have
touchdowns,
not
no picks.
Thrown a pick. They have the fewest giveaways of any team in the league. They've only lost 1 fumble. That's it. That's ridiculous.
No, not prone to mistakes. So you can't go in thinking, oh, this is going to be, the game where, I mean, listen, weird things happen in the NFL. I just mentioned the Giants had a skyrocket, but to go in expecting that you're going to turn them over religiously, I think is a little naive.
If they have 1 giveaway in 5 games, it stands to reason that every week they're thinking they're going to be plus in the takeaway ratio. Why wouldn't they feel that way? The mathematics prove it out. And what do we know about turnover ratio? It usually provides you the winner.
Well, look at the Jaguars. The Jaguars are first in the NFL in takeaways. They're +8 in turnover differential, and they knocked off the Chiefs. And they're also a team that has just 1 loss on the season. Philly is +4, by the way. So that puts them in the top 10 in the NFL. They're tied with the Chiefs. And you read the numbers, so I'm not going to repeat them in terms of how well they've played clean football. And that's also a reason why they're able to stay in games when maybe their offense is not necessarily clicking, because they're maximizing possessions and they're not coughing it up to the opposition.
They
and that
don't
goes a long
make
way, too.
mistakes, and they put 7 on the board when they get chances to. It's that simple. Those are the 2 reasons more than anything else. And again, solid defense. No, don't doubt the defense. It's a solid defense. But if you're playing clean football and you're getting 7s instead of 3s or 0s, wow, are you going to help your chances every single week?
I mean, just the scoring. You were talking about the points that the Eagles have scored, that they had a pair of games in the 30s, but they have held all 5 of their opponents to, you're talking about 26 points or less. The most was the Rams, who scored 26. The Bucs had 25. So 3 of their 5 opponents have had 20 points or less, and 2 in the teens. So they've done a pretty good job, and they lost a lot of personnel up front based on what transpired during the offseason. So it speaks volumes about Fangio and the job he continues to do in terms of plugging in the holes. All right, let's open up the phone lines as we move forward here on Tuesday's edition of BBKL. Lance Medow, Paul Dottino with you. It is presented by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the New York Football Giants, and we check in. Donnie is in Queens joining us here on BBKL. What's happening, Donnie? What do you got for us?
Hey, guys. Good afternoon. Before I get to the Giants, just want to wish John Marrow all the best. Hopefully he comes out healthy, and the fan base is rooting for him.
For sure. We would echo your sentiments.
Yeah. Mad at the team, not mad at John, and wish him all the best. Paul, I spoke to you a couple weeks ago after the Dallas game, you and John, and I said, here we go again. And, unfortunately, that's exactly how this feels. 1-4. With a gauntlet here ahead of us, and we're kind of looking at a similar situation with Daniel's rookie year now, where a, seemingly incompetent management team and coaching staff are going to stack up losses with a rookie quarterback, and they're going to have to make a decision what to do in terms of moving forward with those 2, and then balancing that with the quarterback. Last time they kept the GM, they got rid of the coach. And it just really feels like we're just kind of spinning our wheels here. I'm very curious why the Giants are going into game days with 2 open roster spots. You're seeing things like you're talking about how they had an emphasis on their special teams. Well, guess what? Special teams barely makes a difference in the game. It's not a big enough part of the game. They basically eliminated the kickoff.
No, try the Cowboys that, because special teams won the Cowboys game when they kicked the last-second field goal in the 4th quarter. Come on, man. You know better than that. You're better than that. Don't come up with stuff that's out of left field. You're better than that.
Paul, you're talking about their kickoff units and their coverage units.
Mm-hmm.
Those very seldom shift games. And
not with the new kickoff rule. Not with the new kickoff rule. The new kickoff rule is definitely changing the value of special teams. It's bringing it much more back than you think it is.
Well, I'll agree to disagree on that. But my larger point was going to be that focusing on that in the offseason as opposed to perhaps the depth you have at wide receiver or the depth that you have at quarterback, keeping guys like Jalen Hyatt, who brings 0 value to the team, leaves you in this spot where if the one true playmaker you have goes out, you have nothing. They're throwing nothing out there at wide receiver. The quarterback probably should have sat, because this is where we're at now, where he's in a spot now where he's playing with non-NFL to below-average NFL talent all around him across the board. Besides Andrew Thomas, essentially, at this point. So these things, like these minor victories where, maybe they're covering punts well. Well, great. Teams barely punt. They go for it more than times now because of the new kickoff rules. They're basically spotting teams the ball at the 35-40. It doesn't matter. Why is Deontay Danks still splitting snaps at quarterback when he stinks? It's just like all these things that they do are just completely illogical and nonsensical. And it's just like, and I know I'm just ranting. I feel bad I'm taking it out on you guys. It's just,
listen, Donnie, let me just jump in here. First of all,
we're at the same old crap.
Well, Shane Bowen, and listen, we'll let you go on that note. Appreciate the phone call. Shane Bowen actually was asked yesterday during his press conference about splitting Cordell Flott and Deontay Banks, and he mentioned that he likes Banks' athleticism and his aggressiveness at times at the line of scrimmage, and that's why they continue to work him in. It doesn't mean that it's going to stick like that. Things could change, but that was at least what Bowen had provided. He was asked that exact question that our last caller brought up. That's number one. Number two, in terms of the depth chart, they did address the quarterback depth chart this offseason. So I would not throw that out. I mean, they completely revamped the room. So, I mean, to criticize that aspect doesn't necessarily add up. As far as the wide receiver core, they unfortunately have been hit with injuries, but this is what I always pose to fans who want to revisit things that happened in the past. Who was out there that you think the Giants should have gone after and also could have afforded, given the resources that they put in, remember, to Javon Holland and Paulson Adebo, too. They spent a lot of resources on defense.
Chauncey Golston.
Golston, too, in terms of their pass rush. So the bottom line is, when you revisit this, because right now, unfortunately, they're down personnel, you have to then give me an exact example of a wide receiver that was out there and realistically who they could have brought in. And if you want to bring in somebody like Gabe Davis, yeah, maybe. But remember, Gabe Davis had every opportunity to come here and also spoke to a lot of other teams. So it does take two to tango. And if we're really sitting here at this point of the season and saying Gabe Davis was going to be the make or break player because he had some familiarity with Brian Dable's offense, I think that's a reach.
He's
and that's
on
a
the
bit
practice
of a stretch.
squad with Buffalo right now. He's not even out of 53. And if you want to talk about now, well, what do they do now? Look at the list of street free agent wide receivers who are currently out there. It is not very pretty. So, no, given the fact that they had done all the rebuilding that they had done during this offseason, and you can't rebuild every position.
No.
You can't do it.
Disperse your resources accordingly.
All right. Yeah. They knew they added a linebacker, specifically an edge linebacker in Abdul Carter in the draft. They added defensive line by going out and getting Alexander. Right? They went and they signed Golston. They went and they retooled the defensive backfield by adding two high-priced free agents that you mentioned. They signed Russell Wilson, who, cost more than minimum salary. I mean, you mentioned the quarterbacks. Well, they also, brought in Winston as well.
Sure, but that didn't necessarily strain the salary cap. Winston was actually a good
but the
deal.
point is, they made, I want to say, not counting the draft, I think they signed like 14 or 15 free agents during the offseason. They were busy, and they used up almost all their room. Hudson, they signed James Hudson to be a swing tackle, and he got decent money as what they believed is a legitimate third tackle. All right, they didn't know that Bo was going to be there in the 5th round. They would get him, and he would shine so much in his rookie snaps during the preseason. They didn't know that. So you had to say, okay, they were being diligent by signing a veteran tackle rather than taking a shot in the draft. So, I appreciate his frustration. I honestly do. Believe me, I really, really do. But you're right. Where he's making a terrible mistake is he's looking at hindsight in every one of these issues. That is foolishness. You have to always turn back the clock to the times the decisions were made, understand the context of those decisions, map out what were the choices you had to make, what were the risks, what were the rewards, what were the costs. And if you can justify at that time that logical decisions were made, then it simply means the results went bad. It doesn't mean the decision was a bad decision at the time. Every decision that doesn't work out is a bad decision in retrospect.
Without a doubt.
You can go 100 for 100 if you're going to play that game.
I think as long as there's rational thought behind why you did it within the time frame of when you made that decision, then it at least adds up. It doesn't mean it's going to work out,
correct,
but it adds up. And I just want to add context because, once again, if I'm questioning not giving examples, I'm going to give you, this is based on guaranteed money at signing.
And by the way, before you say that,
sure.
I do want to add, how did it affect the Giants when they lost their kicker right before kickoff?
Oh, you're talking about the special teams
he wants to throw out special teams. It's not that important.
Well,
are you serious?
I mean, I think he was trying to
I'll give you Jeff Eagle's phone number. You can have a conversation with him about it.
Yeah, something tells me he wouldn't necessarily agree.
He would absolutely not agree.
It wasn't so much the kicker. I think it was more of the coverage and the return units. That was the point. But they're synonymous with one another. If you get a good return or you give
all
up,
feeds in.
Yeah, all of a sudden the opposition or you're in field goal range. I mean, think about it. The Cowboys, you brought up Brandon Aubrey, but it's not just Aubrey. It's the fact that they got him in range within the blink of an eye to walk away with a tying field goal to force overtime. So you can't separate the coverage and the return units from the kicking when they go hand in hand. But before we move on, I brought up the free agent wide receivers because I was just curious looking back. So I'm ranking them on this chart based on the guaranteed money that was given to these players at signing, because at least that's the money that they'll probably see when it's all said and done, as opposed to the other bells and whistles. So Devontae Adams was number 1 on the list, okay? $26 million. He went to the Rams. Darius Slayton was actually number 2. Cooper Kupp was 3. Stephon Diggs was 4. Josh Palmer, who is having a hard time getting targets in Buffalo. De'Ami Brown, who went to Jacksonville. Brandon Cooks, Demarcus Robinson, and DeAndre Hopkins. I'm going to cut it off there because now we're getting into guys that made $4 or $5 million, if anything. Now, of that list, if you were to ask me who's making the biggest impact on their new team, I would say, and not everybody has been lighting it up, maybe Devontae Adams, I'll say, but I mean, it's been the Puka Nacua show with the Rams. Cooper Kupp's been relatively quiet. Stephon Diggs had a nice game, but that was against his former team in Buffalo. Palmer, De'Ami Brown, Brandon Cooks, DeMarcus Robinson, DeAndre Hopkins. I mean, whether you want to look at through a fantasy lens or a reality lens, these guys are not necessarily lighting up for their respective offenses. So this is where I'm saying you got to remember to go back as opposed to just talking generics, which don't necessarily add up in terms of the Giants missing out on who they could have had on the depth chart right now, given some of these injuries. I don't see it.
And to fast forward to today, when you consider the street free agent wide receivers out there, as I discussed last week going into the Saints game, are you really convinced that any of those guys coming in off the street are going to be significantly better than bringing up maybe little Jordan Humphrey?
Who also knows your offense and has been here. Remember, you could bring a guy in from the street. He's still going to need a few weeks,
no doubt,
to then actually get to the point where he can contribute.
Now,
and they can't afford to do that right now.
And it remains to be seen now if Slayton can't go, if Humphrey does come up. But, I mean, that's an option right there if you really wanted to add somebody to the 53, if you wanted to make a move. Now, here's the problem. Gano still has 2 more weeks minimum on injury reserve. So you're going to have to use a practice squad activation on one of the kickers again, whether it's McAtamney or Koo. That's going to be one of the activations. Do you want to use another activation on Humphrey at receiver, or do you feel you need it at linebacker, defensive line? Where else might you want to use that activation? That maybe is a possibility. Humphrey is someone I'm sure they would consider.
Yeah, well, he also offers something different in terms of body frame because he's a bigger guy, and he seems to have had good chemistry with Dart in the preseason. So maybe that could influence. I would say, to answer your question in the hypothetical world, I'd put the priority, especially if Darius Slayton is now down. You're taking Slayton and Neighbors out of the equation. Yeah. I think necessity calls for a wide receiver. But here's the other thing that you got me thinking of. They used a lot of 12 personnel in the last game.
They sure did.
They've been shifting now more towards heavy tight end personnel. That may also influence saying, all right, maybe we don't need another wide receiver because we're going to utilize additional tight ends. Another name that I threw out last week with Howard, I threw out little Jordan Humphrey. I also threw out maybe using Gunnar Olszewski a little bit as a wide receiver too.
You could.
That you can entertain. And
he had a good camp.
He had a good camp, and you already have him on the roster for special teams. So you might as well maximize his usage.
And that, of course, is not even thinking about what are you going to do with Collins and Hyatt, who only got into the game late last week.
Yep.
Collins, I charged him with a drop on that one over the middle.
No, understandable.
Sorry, but I had to. It's a drop.
Let's head back to the phone lines. We check in with Coach Kevin in Arizona. Coach Kevin, welcome aboard. What do you got for us?
Hey, guys. How you doing? Hey, I was just wondering if Coach Kafka actually scripts his plays early in the game, because early in the game, obviously, he was really on target with the 12 personnel.
Yeah.
And the tight ends. And you just mentioned that, and that's the key. That's the key in this game. When you have young receivers coming in that have not worked with Jackson Dart very long, you're going to have what you saw, and that's a lot of missed timing, drop balls. I saw Jackson say a few words to one of the receivers, not making a block for him when he scrambled. I mean, I think they're just not all on the same page yet. Maybe the young receivers just need more time with Jackson to kind of get on the same page. I could see there was not really a cohesion there, but 11 personnel looked horrible in the second half, especially 12 personnel. Things were cooking with those tight ends. That bailed out Jackson. That gave him some weapons to work with.
I hear you, man.
I like to see 3 tight ends involved.
Well, they've got 3 that they could utilize, so it's not lacking personnel.
Even 4. Bring in the young boy. I think that could be a very potent offense if you get them all on the same page. But I think the problem with this week was the young receivers just weren't on the same page with Jackson. So I just think maybe in time, give it a couple of weeks, they will be. I just don't see them contributing. But the tight ends, I think that's the key.
I think it's important to remember that Wilson got mostly all the first-team reps during the summer and the preseason and camp, which meant that guys like Hyatt and Collins did get an awful lot of balls from both Dart and Winston. So I don't know if your point holds as much water as you think it does. You know, because Wilson was throwing more to Slayton and throwing more to Robinson, and Neighbors did have a lot of practice times off because he was on load management. But as far as the younger guys who got in the game in the fourth quarter, Dart has thrown an awful lot to those guys since the summertime.
And the other thing is also since the regular season started, they have then had him run sort of a simulated practice after with some of the younger guys who stay behind to work out with Dart. So I don't know. I would agree with Paul. Kevin, I don't think it's necessarily maybe a reflection. But this is what I will say, and this is what I thought you were hinting at. What I think was evident against the Saints is Dart also does a good job extending plays. And sometimes receivers who run their routes have to all of a sudden adjust on the fly because they could still make a play. For example, there was the play, not this game, against the Chargers where Dart's calling Darius Slayton back, and he's saying, Darius, come back. We could still maybe gain positive yardage. So some receivers are not used to that. And while Russ wasn't a statue, Russ was not necessarily extending plays to the degree that Dart is. So I think that's more of the adjustment than maybe not being on the field enough with him.
That's a good point. Don't you think, though, that when you got something that's working, you shouldn't change it? I think Kafka got off the playbook and started when he went to 11 personnel. I think that was kind of an error. And looking back at the game, the first half, the first quarter especially, with the use of the tight ends, if it's working and you're scoring pretty much at will, why change?
Yeah,
why
I understand.
Personnel? I don't understand that.
I understand. I think it was game flow, and I think game flow, unfortunately, when things went bad with the 5 consecutive turnovers by the Giants, game flow, they went into the locker room. This is why we were talking before the show, and that's another reason I didn't want to deal with the Saints game, but in the last 7.5 minutes of that second quarter, it was a complete nightmare. A complete nightmare. You went up from 14-3 to down 16-14 going into halftime. And to be frank with you, I thought if the Giants came out with the third quarter kickoff and had scored on that drive, I thought they would be okay. When they turned it over again, I was like, the game flow is not where they want it to be. And if you notice, that's when they got away from the double tight ends. That's also when suddenly the 70,000-plus fans in the Superdome, on every key play after that, they started hitting 100 decibels on the audio meter.
Well, they're much more into it. Yeah.
Before that, they were 83, 85. They touched 90 once. You could feel the game getting away, and the Giants felt more a sense of urgency to go with the 3 wide receivers because they needed to maybe throw the ball a little more and get downfield
more explosive
with some
plays.
Speed,
right?
Yeah,
and that game flow totally destroyed them. It was.
You're absolutely, Paul. You're absolutely right. And I'll tell you what, you activated the 12th man with those turnovers.
Oh, it was brutal. It was the sound in that building, and I've been there so many times. I know what it's like. It's part of the voodoo.
Yeah, I mean, listen, the fans are usually a big component in Seattle and New Orleans. And Kevin, we'll let you go on that note. Appreciate the phone call. So I don't think that was necessarily a surprising development, but they were yearning for their first win of the season, and they had an opportunity, and it certainly raised it to a whole other level. But I think I agree with you, it was game flow, was the fact that you needed to take the top off the ball, and tight ends will help you methodically move up and down the field, but they're not going to give you the 30, 40 chunk plays, which they desperately needed, and that called for the wide receiver personnel to be on the field much more. Let's head back to the lines. We got Mike in Virginia with us here on BBKL. What's happening, Mike?
Hey, how y'all doing today? Thanks for taking my call.
Sure. What's on your mind?
Once again, I'm calling in. It's the usage of players. Giants fan through and through, but it's so frustrating to see. Like, I understand Hyatt, college-wise, Biletnikoff winner, and sometimes it doesn't translate. But I'm sure y'all heard Charlie Weiss when he was on Huddle, when he did the Huddle podcast. He said, I'm not sure if he can catch a cold, but I know this kid can run. So if all you're doing is throwing go balls to him, shame on you. And that's what it seems like they only do with him. There's never a scheme. Calling plays and scheming people open are completely different things. And for me to sit here and watch that, they don't scheme this kid into the game somehow. It's just a go ball. So, of course, they're going to guard him a certain way. They're going to give him space. We don't see any kind of double move, no setup, no nothing. It's just a straight go ball for him. And then people are upset that he's not making a contested catch. I don't like the fact, and again, I know it's a good thing. The Giants fans are getting hype about it, but Scatterable, hard-nosed runner, love it, right? But let's be real. How sustainable is this? Mike Allstott didn't run like this, like just throwing your head into somebody and trying. Like, I love the kid. I want him to have success, but like we got to work with our players better.
Well,
Like,
that's why getting
sustainable for
Tracy
him.
back is going to be key because you're not going to work him as much. But in fairness, if you look back, Mike, at his usage in college, even before he got to Arizona State, the workload wasn't immense. I'm not saying that the style is related to that. Your point is well taken, but he's not a running back that's coming in with like 3 or 4 years of starting experience where you're saying to yourself, watch out. So that, I think, maybe doesn't get me as concerned in terms of usage. But what you're bringing up, which I get, is just the style, the pounding can eat away even if the baggage of usage is not there, if you're not careful. Yeah.
Right. I just want us to be able to utilize players better and schematically get them involved. Not just throw them out there and run this. Like the teams, the coaches that can scheme correctly seem to always have, it doesn't matter who's on the field. The Shanahans, Rams coach, they can scheme their players open. They use motion to get somebody open. Like, people can talk about Hyatt can't get off a jam. So how about you put them in motion? You're not jamming them in motion. Right?
Well, now I will say
this.
One of the things that I have suggested also, you can use a bunch formation, or you could use a stack formation, and sometimes those things are very good to spring a guy free and to cause some confusion in the secondary.
You're so right, Paul. Yes, but how do we see this? And they don't utilize it, and then they just want to put them to the side. Now we're in a horrible situation. Both of our top receivers are down, right? Now Slayton, he has his ups and downs, right? But he's the one of the better receivers on the team, and I get it. But now what are we going to do? At this point, you have no choice. But again, I just want us to use our people correctly, please. This is so frustrating to watch. We have talent. I wasn't one of these kind of fans that looked at our wide receiver room and was like, oh, no, we don't have it. I see everybody for their individual and what they can do. Like, we know Wando Robinson is the slot. He's like a Steve Smith type, very, very quick in and out of his cuts, can catch the ball, get upfield. And you use him like that correctly. Neighbors is our everything. But what else can we do schematically to get Robinson the ball, to get Bo Collins the ball, to get – who else do we have? I mean,
little Jordan Humphrey. I mean, they got a few guys. I think. Listen, Mike, I don't mean to cut you off. We want to squeeze in another caller or two, and we'll let you go on that note.
Thanks for taking my call,
you got it.
Thank you.
Appreciate the phone call. I think the other thing that is important to take into consideration when you start saying, why don't they use this personnel this way? They're seeing these guys in practice, Paul, on a daily basis.
Yeah.
So I understand it comes across as frustration, but if they don't feel they want to put Hyatt in a situation like that because they don't see it in practice, they're not going to then roll the dice in a game. It's just not what it's about. And if you go back to his college days at Tennessee, he was known for taking the top off the ball, a vertical threat. I mean, that was his MO. It doesn't mean that he doesn't have a skill set to be utilized elsewhere, but when you start saying, well, they need to find ways to get him open, and maybe, throwing a screen his way gives him some confidence, it may. Doesn't mean he's going to start catching 40-yard bombs, but I find it very hard to believe that they're not entertaining some of these things that we're discussing in practice, and they're not seeing it, so therefore, Paul, they're not going to adopt it in an actual meaningful contest.
I always say this, the coaches have much more information in each player's portfolio than anybody else does. And they're not going to go into a game saying, okay, this is what this guy does best. Let's not use him that way. That just does not make any sense. So we can pontificate about the kinds of things that we're not seeing that we think might work because we've seen them work in other places and in other schemes. That doesn't necessarily mean they will work here. And you'd like to believe that the coaching staff knows enough to figure out if those odds are better or worse.
We have a trade in the NFL. ESPN's Adam Schefter is reporting that the AFC North, interestingly, two teams within the same division are changing personnel. So the Browns are shipping Joe Flacco and a 6th-round pick to the Bengals for a 5th-rounder. And clearly they've moved towards Dylan Gabriel, Cleveland. So Flacco became accessible, but he now is going to take over for the injured Joe Burrow. And Jake Browning's had a rough time with interceptions and ball security, and that Bengals offense has been an absolute mess for a variety of reasons. So Flacco, now a veteran, comes in. He'll probably take over that offense. So it's going to take him a few weeks, by the way, to learn the scheme. But I think the point is, if you want to bring it back to the Giants, given they have Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston, that now that's one less team that is out there in need of a quarterback. If you wanted to, once again, go down the road, would the Giants entertain trading one of them? And remember, Winston was brought in on a 2-year contract to still be the backup next year for Jackson Dart. So it was beyond just what's going to go on in the 2025 season.
And Wilson's on a 1-year deal, so you
which
can
expires.
see while the Giants say they're happy with him here and he wants to stay here, if somebody knocked on the door and offered you a deal that you could not refuse, you would certainly, I would think, consider it. But the trade deadline is November 4th, and at this point, the one real needy team of a veteran quarterback with a lengthy resume has now gotten a guy in Joe Flacco.
Well, because Burrow, once again, is going to miss extensive time and may be out for the remainder of the season. Some of the other players that have been hurt, like Lamar Jackson, it doesn't look like it's a long-term
Baltimore's
injury.
not going to do anything.
So it's hard to find, at least as it stands right now, another suitor. I would agree with you. I think Cincinnati was by far the most sensible destination for a veteran, and it's Joe Flacco that is going to now continue his tour of the AFC North. All right, let's head back to the phone lines. Wilson is in Roxbury with us here on BBKL. This should be interesting. What's happening, Wilson?
Hey, Lance. Hey, Paulie. How are you? Hey,
Hi.
before I start, I was out of the country, so I heard about Mr. Mara. So there's a lot more important things in football and sports. I said that to you guys
100%.
a million times.
Thank you.
So I just want to wish Mr. Mara and speedy recovery and his family. So that was that. That's the most important thing. But listen, I want to take a different spin on the call, Lance and Paul. I don't care about the record anymore. I don't care about anything anymore because it's pointless. But I've been telling you something for 2.5 years, and you've been telling me something that I'm crazy for 2.5 years. You give me every description in the book. Paulie, I love you, but you keep telling me, their locker room is good, their leadership is good, there's no fracture, they play hard for this head coach, blah, blah. Okay. But you know what you guys don't have that I have? Proof. Facts. My eyes. 10 wins, 29 losses. Last Sunday, no accountability whatsoever, no professionalism. You can't make one adjustment to save your life, okay? And at the end of the day, the proof are going to back me up, and excuses, unfortunately, are going to, not back you guys up.
Well, hold on, Wilson. Before you go on a whole hold on a minute. Let me. You're putting words in our mouths, which I think is unfair. That's number one. Number two, because I don't remember being on the record talking anything about proof in the locker room and everything's rainbows and lollipops.
After all, Wilson's been in the locker room every day.
I mean, so that's a little.
Come on.
That's a little misleading.
Give me a break.
That's misleading. But number one here, okay. Before we jump to number two, what is that synonymous? How is not making adjustments in your estimation synonymous with locker room issues? How does that prove that?
No.
But that's what you laid out, though.
To me. You always change what
No,
I say.
I'm not sure. No, Wilson. See, I listen very carefully. Unlike, I'm sure, a lot of our listeners and viewers who are probably banging their heads against the wall. I listen very carefully to what you have to say. And you were insinuating locker room issues. That's what you prefaced your comment with.
No, that's not what I say.
You talked about a fractured locker room, Wilson.
Yeah.
And guess what?
This is
There's
amazing.
not a fractured locker room. There's not.
Okay,
we have proof because we're at practice and we're in the locker room. You are not. Sorry, but you're wrong.
Paulie, that doesn't make it. The Giants fans, we don't care. I'd rather have a fractured locker room and win games. That's the
No, but that's the point you made. You didn't come out and say the team is not playing well and their record stinks, and I told you that was the case 2 years ago. Had you said that, I could not have responded. But you came out by saying there's a fractured locker room and we don't have the proof. Well, guess what? We have the proof. It is not a fractured locker room. So you lost. Accept defeat and move on.
What proof do you have? What proof do you have, Paulie?
I'm here every day. You are not.
Okay, so because you're there every day,
I can see. I can see. I talk to the players. I talk to the coaches, and I see what I see. You're not in the building. You don't know.
Wilson, why do proof? Wilson, why do you feel? What's the evidence of a fractured locker room?
Can I say something?
Yeah.
Can I say something? What about the fact that they had nothing else to give Giants fans, so they shut nothing against the kid. They shut a second-round quarterback because they picked him in the first round with a below-average arm. Now, this is our future. You're going to tell me that this kid is – so this is what we have to look forward to. I'm just going to tell you something right now. At the end of the year, when this nightmare is over, because it's going to be over at the end of the year, because we're looking at 1-7, 2-6. It doesn't make a difference. There's only two names that I want to hear from Giants. It's either Bill Belichick or Nick Saban, and that's it. I don't want to hear – because at the end of the year, this nightmare is going to be over. And after when this nightmare is over,
if you would just come out talking about the record and talking about how you would like to make changes, that's fine. You're allowed to have that opinion. No one's going to argue with you about that. But you came out saying that there's no proof. You have proof that the locker room is fractured and broken and not following these coaches. That's what you said.
Wilson, that is exactly what you said. You used fractured locker room. That was the phrase you used.
And we have the proof that that's not true.
Yeah, I mean, Wilson, listen, we're going to let you go on this note because we're just going to go in circles and we're not going to accomplish anything. But don't backpedal. And then the comical part is he now goes on a tangent on a completely unrelated topic with bringing in a new coach, Belichick, Saban. He starts all of a sudden giving a laundry list, and that was not even how the phone call started. No. And then you're accusing us of the exact same thing you do.
Opinions are fine, but don't deal with inaccuracies, especially ones that you can't back up.
Let's be at least somewhat practical. And, you bring up the term accountability. Jackson Dart, during his press conference, the first thing he said was the picks and interceptions are on me. He went through a whole thing. So, I mean, if that's not accountability, I don't know what is. You mentioned, you used that phrase, and then you said you have evidence, and you didn't provide any evidence. So, obviously, under those circumstances, we're going to fight back on that front.
Unfortunately.
It's always an adventure, though, when Wilson calls in. So, you never know what you're going to get. It's like a box of chocolate here with him. But I think that's a good way to...
Please do.
Yes. Bring the emotions down a little bit as we wrap up shop here and close up Tuesday's edition of Big Blue Kickoff Live. We appreciate everybody tuning in. Today's episode, part of the Giants platforms everywhere and Giants.com/podcast, as we are broadcasting from the Giants podcast studio, presented by Hackensack Meridian Health. Keep getting better. Show is presented by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the New York Giants. For Paul Dottino, I'm Lance Medow, signing off here on BBKL. Stay locked to Giants.com for all the latest, and we'll speak to you on Wednesday right here on Big Blue Kickoff Live. Have a good one.